Good afternoon, everybody. This is Mike Miazga with the American Supply Association. We welcome you to another one of our ASA COVID-19 town hall interviews. Over the last couple months, we've kind of covered almost all the supply chain, checking in with distributors and reps on how they're navigating through these unprecedented times in our country and around the world. And we're going to kind of close off the supply chain today. We'll get the manufacturers perspective with three prominent ASA member manufacturers. I'm joined today by Bill Gray, the president of Uponor North America up in Minnesota. How you doing, Bill?
Great, thanks. How's
Right, Bob Williams is here, president of McGuire Manufacturing. Always good to see you, Bob.
Good to see you, Mike. Hello, everyone.
Brian DiVincenzo is up there, president of Wholesale and Commercial for Oatey Company out in Cleveland. How's it going, Brian?
Hey, everybody. Thank you.
So we'll get to current day and what you guys are kind of looking at in the future, but just kind of let's circle back first. How have your operations kind of been affected by the pandemic in terms of anybody in the company get the virus and any type of reduction in force? So just kind of take us back the last couple of months on how you guys have been dealing with it.
Want to start, Bill?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay. So we, like everybody, got caught a little bit by surprise. We saw the escalation of the COVID issue and then tried to kind of get ready for it. We had Friday, the 13th of March, we decided that we were going to do a trial or temporary work from home just to test out, 300 people calling in or dialing into our IT systems just to see if everything's going to work. And then in Minnesota over the weekend, that same weekend, the governor called a stay-at-home order. So what we thought was going to be a one-day test turned into going on 8 weeks now. So yeah, it was we seem to get through it, and we're learning new ways of adapting. Uponor's operations remained open. We're part of construction and then deemed essential under the local acts, et cetera. So we're quite fortunate to be able to keep our operations running. We had to make some changes with how we work and trying to do try to keep employees as safe as possible. That's got to come first. And luckily, we have not had any issues. We were fairly adamant with our instructions that said if you feel sick or otherwise not well enough to come to work, please don't, and we'll help you take care of that. Probably like most jurisdictions, testing has been hard to come by in Minnesota. So definitively saying that nobody's had COVID is probably it's not something that we can do. But we have no known cases and have again been operating largely without incident. And surprisingly, everybody really has adapted well to working from home.
Well, I could speak on McGuire's behalf. Very similar. We returned back from some industry buying groups on March 13th. That's when everything really hit the fan. We strategized as a management and executive team over the weekend, decided to do as much as we could with bringing everything remote with our administrative staff. We made some great technical advances back in January, which really, in hindsight, helped us make that transition very easy for remote employees. I sit here today, there's 3 employees in the office. This is my first time I've been physically in the office all week. We did a 2-week quarantine if anyone was traveling. We did the ceasing traveling immediately of our sales and marketing staffs. Where it impacted us the most is, we're sitting here in Cheshire, Connecticut, which is halfway between Boston and New York, obviously ground zero, if you will. So as Bill said, our employees are number one and their safety and health is number one with them. So we split our crews in half at our production and shipping out of our Connecticut facility. And obviously we did an estimate of about a 20% loss of revenue or ability of shipping just on that. Those numbers have held just about in that area. We have had no reported cases. How we're doing it is every other day work 7 days a week, and things have worked very well. our blessing in disguise is we opened up a 3PL DC in Nevada on January 24th to better service our West Coast customers. And that worked very well. We ramped up a ton of inventory. This is fully assembled inventory. And in hindsight, it was probably the best thing we could have done because it has given us the opportunity to make up that lost revenue, what we're able to ship out of our main plant, and using that facility, we've been able to keep up with things. So we are pleased, we've reacted well. This area is still very impacted. Very limited access, roads are empty, as you guys can imagine. So my team, I'm very proud of how they've risen to the challenge and made things work the best of their ability.
Yeah, so, you know, similar to what the other gentleman said, approximately March 17th, we made the call for any essential production related associates to work direct. You know, fortunately, given the makeup of the Oatey company, you know, we operate on a couple continents, handful of countries, you know, in multiple states. So, you know, we've been pretty well equipped, you know, with WebEx, VPN, you know, cloud computing, things like that, you know, to be able to work remotely. You know, certainly, you know, we didn't anticipate, you know, this was going to happen, but, you know, fortunately we were already set up to do that. You know, like any company, we came into 2020 with, you know, a budget, you know, plans, strategic initiatives, things like that, you know, and great leadership by Neil Restivo, our CEO. You know, we quickly reprioritized in March when this thing was really taking ahead in the United States, that, you know, the number one priority of our business became keeping associates safe, you know, and shortly after that, because, you know, the CISA Homeland Security letter, you know, in our industry, our customers, and we were deemed, you know, essential companies, fortunately, like Bill said, to keep operating. You know, we put measures in place to keep associates safe in our factories and keep them running. So, you know, that's kind of where we stand right now.
When you look at your manufacturing operations, just with the pandemic in general, has there been any slowdowns, any negative effects, a hard time getting materials in, or is, you know, things kind of been full steam ahead still from the manufacturing standpoint?
Yeah, so
For us,
I mean, from our standpoint, oh, go ahead, Bill, sorry.
no, well, I don't know if we're going to keep the same cycle or maybe we could, we'll shift it up. You go first this time.
All right. You know, given back, you know, this thing originated reportedly anyways in China. So our Chinese operations were impacted early on. So, you know, we started seeing some impact on some of our, you know, product categories earlier on. You know, but then when the United States started getting hit harder and locations and states started, you know, shutting down, sheltering in place, things like that, yeah, we started seeing an impact. You know, fortunately, Ohio has been a essential construction state all along, but, you know, we're adjacent to both Michigan and Pennsylvania, so we have supply chain partners in those states that, you know, great job by our legal team, our operations and supply chain, and working with our vendors there, that even though their business, the core of their business might not have been essential, you know, we had to illustrate how, you know, they are a supplier to an essential business. So there was some early disruption early on, but, you know, within relative short order, we got them back up and running and getting the raw materials that we needed to supply our customers.
We had one incident in one of our vendors in Long Island who had to shut down their plant for 2 weeks. Not a major supplier, but an adequate supplier of a key product of ours. Fortunately, we had surplus inventory, but it was getting very close. That's since been rendered. Things are normal as we speak today. I mean, there's been a few hiccups, but we continue to lean heavily on our vendors. We do report cards, if you will, on their status, making sure everything is good. And as of today, we maintain fully operable with our supply chain.
Yeah, when we started hearing about COVID, I guess earlier in the spring, and I think, you know, it was fairly prominent during the AHR show when we were there, et cetera, just kind of hearing some of the shutdowns out of China and travel bans and those kinds of things. we put together a task force which then started looking at supply chain. Uponor doesn't, we don't source much out of Asia, but we're pretty aware that a lot of our competitors do. So we were trying to watch and trying to see what was going to happen there. What was really interesting is we found out pretty quick that even though some of our direct supply doesn't come from China, our suppliers down the chain, you know, a lot of primary chemicals and those kinds of things do originate there. So we did see some opportunity for interruptions. Never really materialized, but that task force then immediately kind of morphed into the operations task force as we started looking at what was going to happen with some of the domestic markets and those kinds of things. So overall, our operations has been running again, like I said, without a hitch. Really, the challenges we have now is what's going to happen to end markets and whether, you know, things like home building. We're a large supplier to single family homes on the rough plumbing systems, et cetera. And you know, we're starting to feel a little bit of a slowdown there. So probably have to start looking at matching operations with demand a little bit better as soon as that picture kind of gets a little bit clearer.
To your point, Bill, I was going to ask next, just taking a look current day snapshot. What are your businesses looking like right now, and what do you attribute the uptick, flatness, or decline to?
Well, as I said, on the end markets, you know, we saw probably Uponor had one of the best first quarters ever. You know, but as we got through into the second half of March, we started wondering, you know, how much was not panic buying, but just maybe safety stock buying by distribution. You know, they're all thinking that supply chains are a little bit tenuous, or could be. So maybe putting in a little extra safety stock and getting it out to distribution centers and to branches and those kinds of things is probably something that happened. So as we came into April, we saw a little bit of a slowdown from compared to last April. And then, you know, May's coming out a little bit different again. So I would say, I think as a company, we're looking and saying probably not going to reach the same levels as we did in 2019. We're probably going to see, as the NAHB was talking the other day in one of their webinars, you're looking at not a V-shaped. Originally, we thought we'd have a V-shaped, you know, short, sharp incident or interruption of business, and then a recovery once more was known about COVID and that sort of thing. Now we're probably more talking about a U-shape. So the big question for all of us really is, how long do we kind of sit in the bottom of that U? When does the inflection happen? And then when do we start entering kind of what I would call an accelerated recovery phase? So right now we're kind of banking on that happening because that's what the industry is telling us. And I think that, you know, every day gives us new data and a new opportunity to recalibrate. So we literally are looking at demand planning. You know, I think on the senior exec team, we're looking at it daily on the demand, the guys who actually calculate, you know, demand and put it into SKUs. They're looking at it weekly, and then we kind of trying to keep the factory calibrated that way. So yeah, it's these are really, really interesting times and really stressing systems in a lot of ways.
Very similar recap. We came off our best year ever in 19. Q1 was really rolling along. Where we fit in, obviously, the labor sequence or installation sequence as fixture trim, we're obviously one of the last installed on the job. So our business in March was good, as I said. First quarter was solid. We exceeded forecast. Going into April, I think there was, to Bill's point, there was a lot of coverage orders based on some of our distributors being a little apprehensive on our availability and the ability to fill the supply chain. That ceased about the second week of April. Week 3 of April was a slow one. My team made some calls. Obviously, we were working very closely with our rep force, our distributor partners, engineers, contractors, getting their feedback. It seems right now that there's a little bit of apprehension in bringing in inventory on a stock basis. There's a lot of just-in-time inventory. We're noticing smaller orders. This type of work we're getting right now, I'm going to call it residual work. And for those markets that are closed, i.e. New York, Boston, which are critical markets for McGuire, I'm going to call that resumption work. I think that's going to kind of fill in Q3 for when they get up and running. I heard some promising news today, limited crews, but crews indeed for the Boston market. But biggest concern we face, getting back to where we fit in the labor sequence and the installation sequence, is what does Q4 and Q1 and Q2 21 bring forth? Speaking quite simply, if there's not any holes being put in the ground, every day that goes by is one more delay for us to recover. So being really geared into the commercial sector, that's my biggest fear. We're making a preparation for that. Obviously, inventory projections and production projections are based on some skeptical information, but that's the biggest challenge that we're facing. So constant communication. McGuire has really brought our reps into a lot of this on polling. Every market's different. 60% off in one market might be 5% in another based on the revenues they produce for us. But we did a weighted average, and we have a good feeling where we're going to be on the end of 2020. It gets a little bit grayer as we get into 21, but the obvious is with lack of new startups is going to be a lull or a slower recovery time for us.
Yeah, we're kind of a unique business too, with operating under a few different brands. You know, we have products that service the waterworks industry. We have products that service the rough plumbing industry. And then we're also in the finish side of business as well. And generally, when you look at waterworks and we see a downward trend, we know within about a quarter or two, we can expect a slowdown in our plumbing business. And the rate and velocity at which this all happened, you know, is unprecedented. And early on, we went back, you know, like any business, we want to do a stress test to see if this thing got really bad, you know, make sure that we're good as a company and we can maintain our headcount. We haven't done furloughs, to one of your questions, or layoffs, you know, but we went back to 08 and 09 and started looking at trends there and to understand. But the high inside fastball with this one was the government stepped in a lot of cases, you know, and I mentioned Michigan and PA that were very restricted with construction, that, you know, it just slammed the door shut. So, you know, just as fast as we saw our waterworks business slow down, we saw the plumbing side of the business slow down as well. You know, like they said, you know, we had a record Q1, you know, in all aspects of our business, all channels we serve. You know, April was rough. You know, we saw a pretty healthy decrease. So a lot of time, you know, spent communicating with our supply chain team and our factories and operations to make sure that, you know, we were right sizing production, you know, while not impacting safety stock levels, you know, because at that point, you know, there's the whole V and U debate, you know, going on. And if it was going to be a V, we wanted to be able to react quickly and service our customers in need. You know, fortunately in May, you know, we're seeing a nice bounce up from April. You know, we're still, you know, well under our original plan, you know, but we are seeing May pick up, you know, and a lot of things that we're hearing from distributor partners, contractors, and our reps, you know, is that markets like New York City, they're putting, you know, plans in place for what does a new job site look like in New York City, and making sure that there's, you know, temperature check stations and sanitation stations and things like that throughout the job sites. So markets are preparing to come back online. So my assumption is that's, you know, some of what we're seeing in our numbers, but, you know, we're still far from, you know, full go in the US. So, and I would agree with Bill that we're probably looking at that U-shaped recovery. I wouldn't be the least bit upset if it was a hybrid UV. And we saw a little bit of a sharper increase, but, you know, we're dealing and communicating with our factories and production staff to make sure that we're ready to go when we need to be.
Let's talk about the employee aspect a little bit. We talked about a lot about here about supply chain and numbers and statistics, but there's we've talked on these interviews before the last couple of weeks about just the human element of it, the mental and emotional aspect of employees. You know, this is a unprecedented time. People are cooped up in their houses, and a lot of uncertainty. As leaders in your companies, what's been your kind of your messaging or strategy on the human aspect of it?
We've been trying, so early on, again, thinking this was going to be short and sharp and maybe working from home for a couple of weeks. We didn't really think through about the first 10 days of this transition. I was pretty proud of the team. Went from Skype as our primary means of communication to Microsoft Teams, and people did this conversion from home, from their own computers, and actually made everything work in terms of installing apps and all that, and then working with a whole new software platform. So I think from that perspective, it's created an interesting kind of set of maybe some more independent skills or some more just understanding how to work remote. In my past, had been an at-home employee working in a sales territory, so kind of understanding how you have to keep connected to your colleagues in the same territory, as well as to your boss and those kinds of things. So it's brought about a different set of disciplines. We've instituted kind of a weekly COVID update call with all employees. So that's the call that I need to get to right after. It's typically 1:30 to 2 on Tuesdays Thursdays. And then we try to just communicate everything as much as possible. What's happening? What can we expect? What's happening at the plant? If we have any other types of company news or whatever, we try to get that in. And then we try to encourage our leaders who are now running teams from their home offices to, through our HR, we've done some online webinars and such that give them access to material that, kind of best practices of how do you keep people engaged. I would say, for the most part, we haven't seen a productivity drop in either in any of our home-based employees. Work seems to be getting done, meetings and stage and gate processes and our typical kind of integrated business processes, our S&OP, that's all been flowing exactly the way it should. So I think that the big win here is that we can now realize that working from home is possible, and the whole commuting thing, given how much time we all used to spend getting to and from the office and flying to meetings and all those kinds of things. I think that's probably the one change that people are going to say, a video call works just as well for me. Don't bother, to get on a plane for a 1-hour meeting and those kinds of things. So yeah, I think it's pretty interesting from a human nature, kind of a human a study on behavior of how we've managed to adapt here.
That's very well said. You look back over, I say a short 8 weeks, it's been the longest 8 weeks of my life, but you review every single week, your steps, your successes and things you need to work on. But probably the most thing I'm proud of with McGuire is the way our employees rallied. This is all new territory for most of them. I mentioned earlier, we made some big advances for us to be able to really just flip the switch and work from home. Bill, same way. We went from Skype to Teams. My executive team and I meet probably 4 times a day, 2 of which are scheduled, but we meet and then break down into the respective territory or departments. And I do the same with my sales managers working with their reps as well. I think one of the things, the messaging of our stability and we try to echo out to our field, to our external customers, starting with our reps, our distributors, our contractors. It's important to know how we stand and what we're up to. So those communication issues are critical. Where I guess I struggle a little bit is what does tomorrow bring? To your point, we can't operate. I mean, I'm on a plane every single week, and I have been for 20 years. That doesn't necessarily need to be the case moving forward. I have mixed emotions. I guess that's for another conversation, but we have adapted very well to this new norm, and I expect this is going to be our platform for quite some time. Our team has really rallied, as I said, in all capacities, specifically working with their respective departments more on a one-on-one basis via the team platform.
Yeah, early on when we started the work from home, Oatey's goal was to really try and keep the regular schedule going. So, don't cancel your meetings, keep the regular rhythm and rigor and communication, communicating the results and what we're seeing, doing, and hearing. We did our first ever remote quarterly town hall to the associates, where we updated our worldwide associates on how Q1 went, what we're looking at with Q2, and just reassuring everybody that, we're focusing on keeping people safe. Our products are essential, part of delivering clean water to people's homes and removing wastewater, from homes and commercial buildings. And if that breaks down, we've got bigger problems in our world, because then hospitals and things like that, aren't going to be able to treat these people. As a company, we've also offered, counseling, for our associates if they're going through any kind of mental illness issues and things like that right now, because these are very stressful times. And then we've also done some fun things. One of our marketing leaders, I think every Friday, every other Friday, schedules a happy hour, so we all get on Teams and, share a glass of wine, late in the day on a Friday, and just catch up and see how things are going and look at one another's face and I don't know, just trying to keep it as normal as possible in this unusual world that we're all operating in.
Great.
We have interesting conversations about when do you think the next time you're going to get on a plane is. That's kind of one. And then part of my job, we're European companies, you guys know, and my world was going to Europe about between 6 and 10 times a year, depending on what it was. And, when is the next time I'm going to go to Europe? I was there in late January and supposed to go again at the end of March, which of course got canceled. But when is that going to happen? And I have a hard time seeing it's going to be in the next 24 months, to be honest.
Oh.
So my family, who used to see me, half of the month, is now saying, "When are you leaving again?"
I get it.
Yeah.
So Bill, I know you got to jump on.
I'll jump on the other call, but it was really great to see you guys and great to catch up and hear that everybody's kind of finding a way through this. But these are interesting times, and you've probably heard that. That's overused. Unprecedented is overused, but I don't know other words that help to describe it. And if any of you guys, you got to promise me, if you figure this out, what you're going to do next, give me a call and.
Yeah.
Not to, because we're making it up as we go along. I mean, it's no playbook here, right?
The same goes to you, Bill. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, Bill.
Great to see you guys. Thank you.
Yeah.
Best wishes.
Thanks. Be safe.
We can wrap up here with the last question. Just put your prognosticator hat on and take out your magic 8-ball. And where do you see this thing headed? Economics wise, business wise, short term, next couple of months, rest of 2020, and maybe where do you see next year?
Well, Brian, why don't you lead that one off?
Thanks for that, Bob. I appreciate it. That's a tough question. And, Mike, what I've said all along throughout this is you learn a bunch of information and you put a plan together, and things are changing and happening so rapidly that 2 days later, you could basically write a history book on what you thought 2 days ago. I think it's going to be a slow climb back to any kind of normalcy that we were used to. If I say that the sales team isn't going to be on the plane in the next 24 months, I'm going to have, even though, I've got sales guys in Colorado and Arizona, and I live in Cleveland, I'm going to have some angry sales guys at my house in about a day throwing rocks through my window. But, I would envision that we'll see some kind of traveling in the next few months. But, everybody's going to be reapproaching this. Can we do a remote WebEx conference? We know a lot of wholesalers are planning to not accept sales visits, at least until mid to late year. And we fully intend on respecting that. From the contractor community, we know that, they've been a little bit more forthcoming and preparing to allow people into their building as long as social distancing guidelines happens. So where the opportunities present themselves, we'll carefully get out and travel at some point, but it's not going to be until at least June. You know, economic recovery is going to be slow. You know, the longer that the economy goes at this rate, you know, the reality is the harder hit businesses and individuals are. You know, so the financial health of the consumer, you know, and a lot of the companies that drive America are going to be critical to how fast this thing bounces back. You know, the good thing is the banks and financial institutions are strong, which is a huge advantage that we have over 08, 09. So, you know, there's a high likelihood that we'll see a much more aggressive bounce back, you know, versus that time frame. But we're fully prepared for a slow recovery. And, you know, from an opportunistic standpoint, you know, even though this is a health pandemic, you know, that ultimately turned into, you know, a big economic slowdown, you know, every single economic slowdown to this magnitude that we've seen in history has resulted in, you know, new laws, new regulations. So we fully anticipate that that's going to happen, you know, so we're doing our best to try and stay in front of that and what that means for us in the future. We want to continue to invest in technology so that, you know, if we have to do remote sales calls and remote trainings, you know, for the time, you know, for the next 6, 12, 36 months, who knows, we're prepared to do that. You know, and even from a product standpoint, you know, there's a good chance that, you know, new products and new technologies will come out from this. So the challenge to my team has been, you know, think about your product categories and how do we evolve with what we're going through right now and add, you know, have value added products to our essential customers in the future.
Well said.
That's very well said. I could say ditto on the traveling. The landscape has changed completely from making a distributor call or bopping into an engineer trying to pull through a job and all the things our reps do on a regular basis, and part of that team building with our reps and our customer base. I do think people will be on planes sooner than later. I think June may be a little aggressive, maybe July, August comfortably. But to Brian's point, the readily acceptedness of their presence at a distributor's door probably is not going to be there, or handing a sample product to an engineer may not be too welcoming. So we made a lot of investments I mentioned early on the technology side. It's really helped us come through this situation. But one of the biggest things is our training. We have spent hours of training. My sales managers and my spec manager are doing nothing but individual training on product training to our reps, to distributors. We are launching 2 new products, which we think the timing could be pretty good, which, to Brian's point, my people are becoming product experts on those. So we do have the ability to get outside in a different forum. We're going to be ready to go. I see the curve. I would love a V, but I'm with you guys on the U. How sharp that can be, I don't know. But I mentioned earlier where we fit in the labor cycle or the addition cycle does give me some apprehension as far as how quickly we can return back to, if there's such a thing as normal type of business. We're probably looking into 2021, as I had mentioned. But the advances we made on training and the investments in technology are really going to set us forth when we're ready to come back and get things going.
Some great dynamite insight from both of you and Bill Gray. Bob Williams from McGuire Manufacturing, Brian DiVincenzo from Oatey Company. Thanks for taking a couple minutes to kind of give the manufacturer's side of things here in what are unprecedented times. And we'll continue our series next week. And also Dr. Chris Keel returns this coming Wednesday with another COVID-19 economic update webinar. Check your email for registration details on that, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks
Everyone
for
be well.
Everybody listening.
Yes, everyone be healthy.